Good morning, everyone. John Spielke here from GAI Insights doing the Gen AI news briefing, rating top news essential, important, or optional. We got interesting stuff here. We have everything from Accenture investing in a new startup called Martian, which is going to do ML ops and model optimization, all the way through whether or not models can lie and what we need to worry about that when they do multi-step planning. All right, Akash, will you start us off with the first article, please?
Sure, John. So the first one that
Yes. Sorry about that. So the first one that we have for today comes from Oracle. So Oracle has launched 50 plus role-based AI agents within its Oracle Fusion Cloud application suite.
Yes, very specific applications for things like customer service. So, what'd you think here, David?
Yeah, so wow, 50. It's a big number. If you go through the list, some that they call out and mention are a scheduling assistant, hiring advisor, customer sales rep assistant, something they call a ledger agent. Basically, it seems like it helps with some accounting-like functions. So it's a little light on detail what they mean by agent, right? As we know, there's several definitions of that floating around, but it tends to mean that you're calling the LLM is calling various functions, and it's actually like executing tasks on your behalf. I didn't see any information about these actually performing tasks on the employee's behalf. I hear a lot of, if you read every single one, it starts with helps an organization do this, helps an organization do that. So I want to call this important because it seems like it could be if these are really agents acting on employees' behalf to do things, these 50 different roles can have functions done for them by the LLM, but I don't know that I have enough information. So I'm going to call this one optional for now, although there is a contact at the bottom of this, and I was thinking we should reach out to this person and see if we should get a demonstration.
Yes, no, fascinating. I was going to make the case for important, pretty much the same logic, except thinking that important is still, discretionary for our reader and for our AI leader. And I think this is something that they should be aware of, make time to be aware of if they have the time. Not essential for me anyway, because here we've got major provider with an incredible sales force. Of all the AI providers, I would put Oracle's enterprise sales force against any of them, certainly against OpenAI or anybody. So I think we're going to see more traction through somebody like an Oracle because they know how to sell into the enterprise better than most. But I don't know, Paul, Luna, what do you think?
Yeah, I actually think that it's probably okay. So I think it is important because it's Oracle. However, it's very, very early. So Oracle is trying to say, look, we have the framework for all the agents that you plug in new agents and we will evolve this, right? This is the beginning, and they're trying to differentiate themselves by saying we have them. That's great. The problem is that I don't think we're ready to use them. And I think it's very, very early. And that's why it's all help that, because we don't trust those agents yet. So from that perspective, it's certainly optional. So my rating, however, is important to say to the leaders, the infrastructure is there. It's experiment with that and see what you can make out of it and to use it later on.
All right. The Democratic mob is heading toward important. Paul, you can hit us with a Barney?
Yeah, I'm super optional. We've talked about every ISV or independent software vendor worth their salt has AI in the roadmap. This is aspirational without production stuff. I agree, Dave, with your thing. A lot of it feels like helper tests. So this thing that, if you just happen to have, LLM and can suggest something in his email, somehow that's an agent. I mean,
Right. That's what I fear. It looks like this could be ChatGPT, right? And you're just saying that it can help 50 roles because we know it can help everybody. There's just not enough information here. It makes me feel like this is, potentially not real.
Yeah, that last thing I was at I was in Columbus at an AI conference. I had a lunch with a buddy that they have Oracle. He just reminds me, I mean, every quarter they have 3-day, they have to do the patch update because, it's all, I mean, so this traditional AI, traditional Oracle stuff is still old school premise update versions here. So I think the fact you may even have to upgrade a few versions even to get these features here. So
Gotcha. All right. So we have the wizened software executive and the polymathic analyst saying baloney. All right. We got optional here. We're going to call this announcement where. All right. Optional. Next.
The next one comes from Accenture. So Accenture has invested in Martian to bring dynamic routing of large language queries.
Yes, and can I recommend that we do this one plus the number 6 model routing venture one together because they're both about Martian.
Sure, John.
Right.
So this one from VentureBeat, it also talks about model routing.
Yes, but the one of the companies, the main company mentioned this is also Martian. So what do you think, Luda?
Yeah, I actually rate it as important. I think this provides, this is just an announcement of investment. So Accenture Ventures invested in this company that is doing the LLM router to optimize the quality and cost of the resulting agent again, right?
Yes.
So we're yet early for the agents, but the fact that Martian is doing it ahead of time and putting a wisdom into how to put the metric, the quality and the cost, and select and measure LLM output on those is actually important. Very important, and they seem to be doing okay in those metrics since Accenture invested in them. So I think it is important as a trend for sure.
Important as a trend and maybe a solution. Interesting. This morning I sent both these articles to a friend of mine who's the global AI head for PwC, and said, look, we're seeing a lot of this in those few companies, the 5 to 10% of companies that are actually deploying in production. We're seeing this as a big issue, and certainly as we go through our total cost of ownership, research, the differences in prices and capabilities are so great. The idea of having some kind of router like this certainly seems critical to people in production.
Yeah, I agree. This is important. I wouldn't necessarily say it's new. I had worked with McKinsey to create the case study for their internal generative AI platform, Lily, that it just published about a week or so ago. And they are doing something similar, and they actually built this capability custom. So I mean, it's definitely important. I would just note, I guess, it's not necessarily new. So if you aren't using this approach, you're already behind.
Well, I think the new part here is that this is a product. I agree with you that the leaders are doing this. Product. I think that's significantly different, because I think that's evidence that the need is there. That
Absolutely.
People are building their own.
Yeah, it's definitely a critical piece of the stack. So
we saw last year on John Spottiswoode at their convention talking about when they were in production, they were routing different models based on cost. So I think there's both cost routing. I think the other thing we're seeing is we spend more and more time defining, refining, getting feedback on enterprise intelligence application framework. It's clear that orchestration or routing is a critical piece, and this is productizing it. Now, certainly Bedrock and Bedrock from AWS and Vertex from Google claim they have some orchestration layers, as does Llama and others. But definitely important trend, and I would agree, John, on important. And leaders need to understand that we're in a different world right now, where applications are going to have multiple models. Unlike last year, everyone's kind of thinking it had to be just one model from OpenAI.
Well, shouldn't we rate this essential? I mean, this is the first product. You know, we've got multiple case studies of people building their own. Actually, people who typically don't build software like this, operational software, like a McKinsey or the.
But the announcement is just an investment. They don't have production customers yet.
Okay.
Yeah. And I don't, and it's different from what AWS and other middle layer providers were offering. This is really a router. It's real-time optimization on when you deploy the model to figure out which one will produce the better answer at the better cost. So it is very different from what we saw. But I don't think it's essential yet, because I think there will be others. And yeah.
I feel like the new gorilla that came in, you know, have you seen that study where there are gorillas, a group of gorillas, and they have there's a ladder and there's a set of bananas up top, and every time the gorillas go up to go get the bananas, they hit them with a fire hose, and probably can't do this anymore, but and then the new gorilla comes in and there's no fire hose, and the other gorillas pull him down to try to save him from that. So I'm that poor gorilla. I've come in, I'm reaching for essential and getting pulled down by the other gorillas. Okay, we're gonna go for important on this one.
Yeah, and John, I want to remind everyone on the line to share your comments as well. If you disagree or agree, please let us know in the comments.
Yes, and don't forget to subscribe and like the channel if you're on YouTube. All right, Schrodinger's Memory, kind of a provocative and interesting way of looking at this. What do you think, Akash? Tell us what it's about.
So this one around large language model memory and how it is like Schrodinger's memory, meaning that it only becomes observable when a specific memory is queried.
Yes, and in here, using UAT, universal attribute theory, fundamental theory in machine learning, in terms of explaining how the LLMs have persistent memory or not. So, what do you think here, David?
Yeah, it's universal approximation theory, which I hadn't been familiar with before. And so this is a short research article from two researchers at Hong Kong Polytechnic University, and it is clearly translated, and it could be a little bumpy read sometimes as a result of that, but still they did a decent job. Basically they are positing that LLMs do indeed have memory, although according to this principle, Schrodinger's memory, that you can only figure that out basically when you prompt it to see if it has a memory. And it compares the human memory to LLM memory, some differences, some similarities. It's interesting. It's super optional, I would say. I think if you want to geek out a little bit and have a bit of a theoretical exploration here about LLMs, it's worth reading on your lunch break, but otherwise it's not really going to affect your day-to-day, and I would say then skip it.
All right, so geek fodder, but not for optional for our executive. What do folks think?
I think it's super, 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 super optional, because I think the assumptions in the article are, I don't want to say they're wrong, but they're misleading big time. Like, they're trying to plaster a definition of memory on top of LLMs that by definition do not have memory. They're doing one prediction at a time by definition. So it's really misleading. And so I say I would have taken this out of our review, but since it's here, I would say super optional.
Well, see, I could get in a debate with you about what you just said. Now, I mean, frankly, I'm not sure if what they're saying really matters, but you could argue, you could argue that the fact that it's able to remember the facts that it has been given, all the data that it's been giving. It's remembering that, oh, this word typically comes after the previous word, right? You could define it that way. Does that actually matter in the way that these are executed, built, improved? I'm not really sure. It just seems like it's a definition, like you said, that they're slapping on it. So I'm definitely not arguing that this is anything but super optional, but I don't know if, you could define it as a memory, I think.
Yeah, this is projecting their thinking on top of the actual factual mechanism that LLMs deploy. So that's why it's a disconnect. So I think it's misleading.
Yeah, I'm with Luda. I think that these, from an epistemological standpoint, the ontology that they are sticking on top of the mathematics is an arbitrary ontology.
Yeah.
Like, what's the difference between a memory and a weight? You know what I mean? And so, and then when you're dealing with tokenization of the language, you're already into a kind of different primitive in the ontology, and now we have weights, and so to slap a label on it, I would argue a weight's a memory. You know what I mean? So what the heck? I'm with Luda. Super optional, but once again, we have our Chinese brethren trying to get at the theoretical backdrop for these models, and I think.
But John, before you move on, I think it's another great example of the inflation of language definitions that's just clouding an already confusing marketplace. We've already talked earlier about agents. We just had a discussion here on memory. It's really hard for the AI leader to understand a fast-moving market with clear definitions. Now we slap on a whole bunch of other vague definitions. That's just adding to the mud.
Absolutely, and it also points out that the absolute dearth of philosophical understanding of computer scientists, right? Which I think is, we could kind of live with it when a bunch of engineers were claiming that reality was, intersubjective verification was all of reality. But now we have these knuckleheads actually creating things that talk back to us. We got to teach them all philosophy. Anyway, okay. With that, we're going to make this optional. Next.
Okay, the next one comes from Mistral. So Mistral is now offering a free API, improved pricing, a new enterprise-grade Mistral small model, and free vision capabilities on their platform.
I just have to say, having grown up the progeny of, people who grew up in World War II, my mother had a love of the French and everything French, and my father had a disdain for it. And it's so great to just watch this Le Plafond, La Plafond. It's probably just me. Anyway, let's see. Who do we have on this one?
I think it's me.
All right, Luda, what do you think?
I rated it as optional. I think it's a catch-up. It's great that they're doing it. I like the price drop. That is really an interesting indication where the market is going. But I really think it's optional.
Paul, what do you think here?
Yeah, optional as well. I think it's a continued move towards it. I think it's notable that we're starting to now finally see a lot more action on the small models. Both the OpenAI had many. I had a call with a person who leads a 3,000 person development shop at one of these huge consulting firms. They're seeing a pickup in small models, but optional for now. I mean, it's like what we expect. We expect price decreases to continue across the board, and all the major vendors that continue to match each other's pricing. And with Llama 3 out there pushing price pressure down, I think we're going to see more of these pricing changes.
Yeah, I mean, and it does. What I'm going to say does not remove my opinion that this is also optional, but the amount that the prices have dropped in 2 years, right, is pretty astounding.
It is.
If you go back and look at how much it was for, 1 million tokens 6, 12, 18 months ago, it just continues to drop precipitously. However, I do wonder with the O1 model from OpenAI, which is now putting a lot more computational requirements on inference, if more models are built the way that they've built that one, are we going to start kind of stressing the energy and the compute system even more again? And could these prices at the least kind of start to stabilize, or could they even tick up? I think it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, I mean, if you go back to the conversation we had about training versus inference, remember we had a couple articles that looked at you can get a model through investing in inference. You can get the performance up to closer to a larger trained model. I wouldn't be surprised if the architecture of the phone is going to cause us to take the balance between training and inference and put more of it on inference, because you run a smaller model. I don't know if this is true. My hypothesis is a smaller model with lots of inference and chain of thought reasoning and so forth begins, I mean, there's some evidence, begins to form like a next tier model. So a small one becomes a medium one becomes a large one in terms of its function. And the wave of at the edge intelligence, I think, is going to make inference happen a lot more, which to me rhymes with biology too. I mean, if you look at the protein expressions of DNA, think of DNA as the model, protein expression as inference. You know, it's when you have a highly decentralized intelligence system, you know, encoding at the core versus, you know, expression. I wonder if there's some energy formula that says you're better, you know, that trade-off is going to go more toward expression or inference. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I am convinced that this is the era. We are entering the era of inference optimization, and we saw a number of articles on that, and the trend is going to continue.
Luda, I love that term, inference optimization. I haven't heard that before. That's
The
beautiful.
era of inference optimization. Don't lose the error part.
Oh, true.
You get columns and lentils and things like that. When you say era.
Remember the chips, the vertically integrated platforms for particular applications and fields. It's all kind of making it train models faster and optimize them when they're running.
Yeah, the thing we reviewed from Ethan Mollick yesterday, I think, was, you know, gave a little, and as I say, a lick and a promise toward that. I mean, he really didn't explore it, but I agree with you.
Yeah.
We should write something about that.
We should.
All right, let me get on it. I'll talk to you later. Okay, next.
Okay, the last one that we have comes from OpenAI, and it talks about how OpenAI's new model is better at reasoning and occasionally deceiving as well.
Yeah, reasoning and lying as it gets, you know, I was thinking of good old B.F. Skinner, you know, talk about if you look at these things as, you know, behavior from a behavior standpoint. Right? What do you think, Paul?
Yeah, I mean, I think O1 is a horribly named product, but is a big deal in terms of AI leaders understanding the capability and where it's going. David mentioned earlier about multiple model working at the inference before display back to the user here, and I think this is a good example of it. So I have this as important. I think it's it'll clearly be super expensive and not used for all the queries, but I think it's an indication of where this market's going. And I think when you start helicoptering up as an AI leader and thinking about what's the world going to look like for my organization in 3 years, you know, the price of O1's intelligence right now, which is expensive and impressive intelligence and expensive, I think comes down, or at least assertion, or at least you plan for that coming down, you know, potentially dramatically in 2 years. So I have it as important.
Yeah, I support important. I mean, I think the we're kind of going meta, right? In the sense that the models are going to start with chain of thought reasoning and other, you know, planning kinds of things. I think the models are going to start to recognize the guardrails and then start work around them. So it's going to be, I think it's going to be escalation between the models and the guardrails as the models get more intelligent, just like they are with, you know, crooks, right? I mean, you know, there's that, you know, what's interesting here, and I just want to note too, Tim was saying from our last conversation that edge models scale and biological models, you know, are still much larger and have way more efficient scaling when you think about it on an energy basis. But you know, back to this thing, you know, I think what's interesting is that each of these models has an ethics underneath, and you know, the silliness of a lot of the conversation here is there is no universal ethics, in my assertion. You know, sorry, Immanuel Kant, right? But so I think that's what's underneath this. Like, what is it optimizing for? They call it goal hacking. Goal hacking is just a slice into the notion that there's no universal ethics. Yeah. And every optimization function has an ethics built into it, whether it's explicit or not. So anyway, I think it's going to get really interesting.
Yeah, and John, related to that, and I guess going off my riff earlier, I think we have never seen price performance curves change like this so much. I mean, we were already talking about what's happened in the last 18 months. We don't see this in cars. We've never seen this in computer chips. I guess we're seeing a little bit in the NVIDIA chips a little bit here, but it's breathtaking on how fast intelligence is price is falling. And what does that mean for a company? It's really
Yeah, I think that's some of the stuff in genetics was close. I mean, because they were 10 times faster than Moore's law on gene decoding. But what I think is that gene decoding was one vector of improvement. We have the architecture of where the improvement is going to sit. Is it going to sit in the model? Is it going to sit in the hardware? Is it going to sit in the network architecture of multiple levels? Is it going to sit in the inference, right?
So, guys, with all due respect, I'm not sure I can back the important.
excellent.
This article is somewhat alarmist, saying the models can lie because they are too much focused on delivering on the goal. So that and at the end of the article, you see the folks admitting in OpenAI that this is way early and it needs the monitoring function on the chain of thought capability to make sure that the model doesn't get out of sync, essentially. So it's really an indication how early this is. If you are thinking of rating it important to just flag that this is not ready to adopt as into training and production yet, it's a play with model until it gets stronger. I think that's okay, but otherwise I would rate it as optional for now because it's so early.
Yeah, I'm on board with Luda. This is article that's looking at the author spoke to one of the people at a company that was the safety check on the OpenAI O1 model and kind of getting under the covers of what they saw. And this point about it's different than a hallucination because it's kind of intentionally maybe saying what the answer giving an answer that is incorrect because it's so focused on its goal. I mean, I don't see that as important right now. You can only use 30 of these queries a week or something. This is in preview. I think it's interesting, but let's see what happens when they actually make it, production grade, and you can do something with it.
Yeah.
Well, it's 2-2, and
we know what happens there.
As the moderator, it's my responsibility. I'm like the vice president. When the Senate is tied, I have the tie-breaking vote. So on this, we're going to go important. All right.
And what's the rationale?
John said.
For me, the rationale is really easy, which is that we have to. First of all, it's remembering that important is discretionary. That to start thinking through whether it's chain of thought reasoning, which is now in the marketplace, and or agentic behavior, that there's a more complex set of hallucinations that have to do with that have the functional issue of getting around the guardrails, and you need to be aware of that. That's my rationale. So, because people, the leading edge folks, I think, are going to start deploying chain of thought reasoning in the next 6 months. The 5 to 10% who are in production. All right, Ankash, we have the big tote board coming up here, and Oracle optional, Accenture and model important, optional, and then important on don't get blindsided by the new kinds of hallucinations. All right, folks. Anything important to tell our audience here on a hump day?
I do. I have one thing, John. I was in AI week in Columbus, Ohio, and gave a keynote there. But before me was a city manager for a company called Hillard in Ohio, and I was so impressed. Hillard in Ohio is 27,000 residents. They've made the whole city, every piece of data they have for the city on all the streetlights and everything, they make it available for startups. The city is finding funding for AI compute for startups. They're working with 4 or 5 companies. It's one of the most innovative companies or small cities I've seen out there that's aggressively going after IT startups. They're leveraging the big Intel fab that's being built. I think it's about 20, 30 miles away there, but really impressive expertise or impressive presentation by the city manager from Hillard, Ohio. I was blown away.
Wow, that is spectacular. What a great idea to do cluster development. I mean, and if one of the big models is smart, maybe they would do a strategic relationship with such a city.
I hope they do. I mean, she literally said, we want our city to be AI lab, our entire city to be AI lab for AI startups. We are here to help. They have startup ambassadors. They have, I mean, it's just.
Oh, well, they presented our learning lab.
I will reach out to her. She was a Melanie, I think was her name. I think she would. She's out selling this thing here, but I want to give her more visibility and support because it's absolutely impressive.
And AI for mass, I think it's a very good case.
Yeah.
What a great thing. Well, being the born and bred mass hole I am and living here in Chicago, great innovation coming out of Hillard, Ohio. Who knew?
Yeah.
It's flyover country, man. They don't do anything down there except make, consumer products and stuff. Anyway, great to hear. Excellent. What a model. That's fantastic. All right. Anything else? Luda, David, Ankaj?
No.
All right, folks. We'll see y'all tomorrow. Bye now.